Well, I don't even need to talk after that video. That's kind of my talk in a nutshell. My name is Hollie Hawkins. I am a pediatric nurse practitioner, and I work in a Fostering Hope program at OU Physicians Clinic. And we recognize that children in foster care need additional services that can normally not be received in a regular pediatrician's office. We're able to spend more time with them, to have a multidisciplinary team approach to what we do with the children and their families. And we have an opportunity to have both the foster family and the biological family present at their medical visits. So it's a wonderful opportunity for us to work with families and hopefully heal families at the same time. I have been working in this program for about 4 years, and when I first decided to work in that clinic, I was told by our medical director that I would hear and see stories that I had never heard and seen before in my protected world. And she was right. Every day I hear stories that I just cannot believe that exist and go on every day behind closed doors like we've seen in the films today. She also told me that I would struggle with not being cynical because our system is so broken, which I will talk about in a little bit. And she's right. Every day, 10 times a day, I think, what are these people thinking? Why are they making these decisions about these children? And so I do fight against cynicism. And lastly, she told me that I would see and experience damaged children. And I wasn't even sure really what that meant. I didn't know what a damaged child really meant, but every day I experienced the results of trauma and abuse and neglect, and I see it as a result, it results in damage in a child. So in today's, the spirit of today's conference, I thought it was important that you know what goes on out there so that you can become part of the solution. We have great opportunities and great need that we can help make a difference. I thought I'd start by just explaining the magnitude of the program. There are over 500,000 children in foster care in the United States. And as you saw in the video, at least 12,000 children in the state of Oklahoma. And that is a disproportionately large number compared to other states that have equal children. Most of the children that are removed and placed into foster care are removed because of neglect, almost 80% of those. And then a lesser amount, more like 15 to 20, are physical abuse, and 8 to 10 is sexual abuse. The reasons for the removal or out-of-home placement are, you think it's going to be a variety, but it's usually 5 or 6 key things. And some of those we've already heard about today. Drug use, just the prevalence of drug use, just takes common sense and parenting skills away from people. We see a lot of drug-exposed children. Domestic violence, exposure to it, or the recipient of it. Mental illness, trying to be a mentally ill parent, parenting a child, does not end up in good results. And we also have a lot of parents that are cognitively impaired. They just do not have the mental capacity to parent a child the way they should be, and it ends up in drastically impacting the results for the child. There's physical abuse, sexual abuse, there's a death of a parent, there's a parent who goes to prison, there's a grandmother who's already raising a child and she gets cancer and can't care for the child any longer. And what we see, which I always am astounded at, is that these circles are so small and so isolated. So you have a grandmother that cares for 4 of her daughter and her son's children because both of them have lost custody of their children, and she has no one. She has no one in her extended family to help her with the children or who she can leave the children with while she's going for cancer treatment. And it is, or in other situations, there's no one that can be accepted by the court. So that means that everyone has some sort of, lives in poverty or has a court record or a felony charge that keeps them from being able to care for children. So most of these kids come into care emotionally, physically, and spiritually impoverished. And they come usually with developmental delays. If you've been left in a car seat since you were born and you're now 6 months old, you're going to have delays in your gross motor skills. You don't crawl yet, you don't pull up yet, you've never been spoken to, you've never been talked to, so your speech and language is going to be delayed. You've never been taught to use a knife or a fork, you've just been kind of given a bottle over and over, way past when you should be receiving a bottle. You lack fine motor skills to draw and write and use a knife and fork. So developmental delays are almost in half of the kids that come into care. They're usually under-immunized, means that they haven't been taken to their medical provider's office for their regular immunizations. They have dental caries. Most of them have never even had a toothbrush or know what it is. And I'll say to someone, so are you brushing your teeth? And how many times a day? And they're like, well, I would if I had one, kind of thing. So just the whole hygiene issue gets lost with some of these parents sometimes. They're usually behind in school. A lot of these kids that come into care have to repeat a grade just to try and aggressively catch up. And there are other social and emotional behaviors related to school and home. Most of them are malnourished, especially those that are coming in for neglect. The prenatal drug exposure, these babies are actually born addicted to drugs and sometimes have to have morphine and stay in neonatal intensive care units for long periods of time to come off of their addiction from their maternal drug exposure. A lot of them actually wear glasses, like we do their vision and they can't see, and they say, yeah, I used to have glasses, but they've been broken and I've broken a couple of pair, and so no wonder they're not doing well in school, they can't even see. So that's one of the things we do, is try and make sure they are adequately prepared in all areas to be successful in school. A lot of come with depression, a lot of abandonment issues, and a lot of sleep disturbances. Nightmares, night terrors, just not sleeping on heavy amounts of sleep medication and just not sleeping, fear, anxiety, never knowing what's going to happen at night, and even in a new home, you don't know, so you just stay awake, which causes daytime behavioral issues and poor health, and it's just kind of a bad cycle. The most vulnerable children that we deal with are ages from birth to 5, because they don't have a voice and they're fairly isolated. So they're not going to school, they're not exposed. So children can be, hidden's not the right word, but protected from society by just being in someone's home, and they can not speak for themselves, and it puts them more likely for neglect and abuse. Children that are taken in that lower 0 to 5 age group are less likely to be reunified with a biological parent. And we know, and a couple of the speakers have alluded to it, that there's new science that tells us that young, moldable brains that are being exposed to trauma and abuse and a chaotic life that a lot of these people live without any structure or stability in the home actually changes the architecture of a brain and makes it, the word that we throw around is called epigenetics, where it's just changing that brain so that we know that they're going to have trouble cognitively, self-regulating, socially. And so we want to have those children that are young. I believe that domestic violence, Donna talked about how that the goal is trust, the goal is safety. So when I cry, you come. I come and soothe, you cry and know I'm going to be there. And it's a process of development that it's very, very difficult to recreate that situation when you've lost it during the developmental stage that it's happening in. The other most vulnerable group is the adolescent group. And those children age out of the system at 18. And most of the kids have been in care for a long time because they're also the other less attractive, adoptable options for people that are looking for children in their home. They have high rates of homelessness, prison, multiple arrests. They usually lack a high school graduation, poor health, because once they age out of the state health system, they really have no access to health care. They lack employment, so they're dependent on public assistance. They're more apt to become parents at early ages. So I have many foster children that I see that also I see their child. And many times they're not in the same home because the foster parent who's fostering the teen doesn't want a newborn in their home. So you have this, again, this perpetual splitting of the ability to bond and build trust between a mom and her baby. And again, as mentioned before, there's also a high level of sex trafficking that happens with these vulnerable teens that are out on the street without any way to make a living and are in unsafe situations. We also have shelters in Oklahoma, which when you travel to other states and they hear that you still have shelters, they're like horrified because over and over research for not even recently, like 10, 20 years, shows that children who are living and being raised in a shelter or institutional setting is less than ideal. So currently there are plans to close the shelter that we have in Oklahoma City, the larger shelters than in Oklahoma City and Tulsa, but there's also no place to place the 50 to 75 children that filter in and out of there. And the teens that are in and out of there are leaving. They go AWOL, they come back, they go get high, they come back, sleep, get some food, leave again. And so it's just it's a horrible vicious cycle, and we need plans of what we're going to do with these teens if we truly are going to close our shelters. Just briefly, I'm going to mention that everyone has an opinion about the protection of children, and there is ample blame to go around. The judicial system is very unique in Oklahoma. There are kind of odd rules and regulations around having a child removed from a home, and every judicial court or every judge that you sit before will have a different opinion. Like one judge will think that it's never appropriate to terminate rights on a biological family. And so that child will continue to go through court and might end up in the court system for years and years and years and be moved from home to home to home. Another judge who has a different mindset might terminate the first time they hear about the story. And so there's no consistency, and it's luck of the draw for a family or a foster family that's wanting to adopt or a biological family about what judge they're going to get in front of. So one of the things we're advocating for is a standardized set of rules and regulations that the judicial system follows so that there's standardized realization for everyone involved and everybody's on the same playing field and has the same goals for the children based on evidence-based practice, meaning based on the current research that shows what is best for the children in care. The other big area of concern is the child welfare system. It's a very broken system. There are caseworkers that are responsible to fulfill the treatment plan that the judge has put in place. So that means that they need to know where the child is the child safe, and are the biological parents following their treatment plan and having visits with their child. The problem with this is that it's a limited resources. So you have high caseloads, inexperienced staff, and a very high turnover rate. So we all know that the long-term health for these kids is going to be living in an environment where they over and over receive the support and responsive caregivers that they need so that they can, over time, rebuild and redevelop a trust, not only within themselves, but with some key adults in their life. So, knowing that the government is a vastly broken and flawed system where government officials are overworked, overwhelmed, under-resourced, and overly criticized, the government is currently functioning in the family restoring and family building business. And it just is not a good fit for a government. So it's a good place for me to encourage all of you today to figure out the role of the church, both as a community and both individually. So how do we as believers, or being Christ-like in our behavior, how do we step in and help not take it away from the government? I think that's too big of a goal, but just how do we undergird and support what's currently happening and slowly over time build a healthier system for the children in Oklahoma? Not everyone is equipped or called to be a foster parent. It is a tireless job. It is a overwhelmingly sad, overwhelmingly joyful experience. And I have had the opportunity to meet amazing foster parents that truly believe this is their goal and call for their life. And if that is you, if you're having that nudging, if you're needing me to help push you over onto the other side, then that is awesome. I am thrilled that you hear that voice and you and your spouse are committed to doing that. But it's not for everyone. So what is our role? What can we do? We know we all have callings on our lives. We all have gifts and talents that God has given us that we need to figure out what direction that is. And sometimes that's just making just one step ahead, and that ends up leading you to where you need to go. I know we all have stories where we can look back and see, wow, God really was in control of that path as I went down it. So I'm just encouraging all of you today, as a result of all these incredible social service opportunities, to figure out where you fit, what place is best for you to be part of. The church, as a church, doesn't need to be a big, grandiose plan. It can be a small plan. It can be finding one foster family in your church, or just for you as a family to support them. They need resources. They need money. They need equipment. They need diapers. They need school supplies. They need vans. I have one family that a couple that was not ever going to have children, and they fostered for a friend of a friend kind of thing. Now they have 8 children, 2 sibling sets of 4 that they've adopted, and they just brought me a picture of a big 12-passenger van that they bought, and they take these kids everywhere. They're awesome, awesome, awesome family. And maybe it's just that we pray for them. Maybe we just take on one family and we just pray them through upbringing of these, or parenting of these children. Or maybe you think that there's a ministry possibility in your church, that there's an opportunity to build a whole environment where you train people to be foster respite care providers or babysitters or ministers to not only the families, but the children themselves. So there's an opportunity for everyone. But mostly we need to pray. We need to pray for not only the church, but the family and the children, the caseworkers, the government decision makers, that we can all remember that the goal of this is for the child, not all the other things that get involved in it. There's a lot of darkness in this system. There's a lot of dark, dark stories in this system. But we are the light. and there is light in each individual child that we can touch. Thank you.